Abraham Lincoln was born in a very simple home. It was a small cabin made of logs, with just one room. This cabin was in the backwoods of Kentucky. The year was 1809. His family did not have much money. They worked very hard every day just to survive. Life was not easy for them. The world outside their small cabin was vast and full of challenges. Young Abraham grew up surrounded by the quiet sounds of the wilderness. He learned about the land and the value of hard work from a very young age. His parents, Thomas and Nancy, taught him to be honest and kind. The Lincoln family moved from Kentucky to Indiana when Abraham was just a boy. They were looking for a better life. They built a new home in the dense forest. Once again, it was a rough log cabin. Abraham helped his father clear the land. He learned to use an axe and became very strong. He spent his days doing difficult farm chores. He plowed fields, planted seeds, and cared for animals. This life was demanding, but it shaped him. It taught him discipline and the importance of family. He understood what it meant to struggle and to work for everything you have. Life in the wilderness was often lonely. There were not many neighbors or other children to play with. Abraham's world was mostly his family and the work that needed to be done. Sadly, when he was only 9 years old, his mother, Nancy, passed away. This was a great sorrow for the young boy. It was a difficult time that brought much sadness to their small home. His father later remarried a kind woman named Sarah Bush Johnston. She became a loving stepmother to Abraham. She encouraged him and saw the special spark within him, a spark of curiosity and intelligence that set him apart. His childhood was defined by these simple, yet profound experiences. He was not born into wealth or power. He was a boy of the frontier. He knew the feeling of dirt on his hands and the ache of a long day's work. This upbringing gave him a deep understanding of ordinary people. He knew their hopes and their struggles because he had lived them himself. This connection to the common person would become a cornerstone of his character. It would guide him throughout his entire life, from the quiet woods of Indiana to the grand halls of the White House, making him a leader who truly understood the heart of the nation. Even though Abraham Lincoln had very little formal schooling, he had a great love for learning. In total, he probably spent less than 1 year in a real classroom. The schools on the frontier were small and far apart. Teachers were not always available. But this did not stop Abraham. He had a deep hunger for knowledge. He wanted to understand the world beyond his small farm. He knew that reading was the key to unlocking that world. So he decided to teach himself. He would read every book he could find, again and again, until he understood every word. Books were very rare and precious on the frontier. There were no libraries or bookstores nearby. Abraham would walk for miles just to borrow a book from a neighbor. He read books like the Bible, The Pilgrim's Progress, and Aesop's Fables. He read them by the dim light of the fireplace after a long day of hard labor. He would copy down passages he liked on a piece of wood with a piece of charcoal because he did not have paper and a pencil. This practice helped him remember what he read. It also helped him develop his own unique style of writing and speaking, which was clear, simple, and powerful. His stepmother, Sarah, was a great source of encouragement. She saw his passion for reading and did everything she could to support it. She made sure he had time to study, even when there were many chores to do. She understood that his mind was a special gift. While others might have seen his reading as a waste of time, she saw it as an investment in his future. Abraham was always thinking, always asking questions. He wanted to understand not just words, but ideas. He was curious about law, history, and how people governed themselves. His mind was constantly at work, piecing together the world. This self-education was the foundation of his future success. It was not easy. It required incredible discipline and a powerful desire to improve himself. While other boys might have spent their free time playing, Abraham spent his time with books. He was building his mind, one word at a time. This love of learning stayed with him his entire life. It shaped his thinking and his character. It gave him the wisdom and the eloquence that would one day inspire a nation. His journey from an uneducated boy to a great thinker shows the power of curiosity and the will to learn. As Abraham Lincoln grew into a young man, he left his family's farm to make his own way in the world. He was tall and strong, known for his physical power. One of his early jobs earned him the nickname the rail splitter. He was hired to split logs into rails for fences. This was incredibly hard work. It required strength, endurance, and precision. He would spend long days swinging a heavy axe, splitting thousands of logs. This job further connected him to the idea of honest physical labor. It became a powerful symbol of his humble origins, a reminder that he was a man of the people who was not afraid of hard work. After working various manual labor jobs, Lincoln decided to try something new. He moved to the small village of New Salem, Illinois. There he took on several different roles. He worked as a shopkeeper, running a small general store with a partner. Unfortunately, the business was not successful and eventually failed. It left Lincoln with a large amount of debt that took him many years to repay. This experience was a difficult lesson in business, but he was determined to pay back every penny he owed. This commitment earned him another nickname, Honest Abe. His integrity was more important to him than money. While living in New Salem, Lincoln also worked as a postmaster. This job was important because it put him at the center of the community. He was responsible for the mail, which meant he interacted with almost everyone in the village. People came to know him and trust him. He was friendly, told good stories, and was always willing to help his neighbors. At the same time, he worked as a surveyor, measuring land for new settlers. This work required him to be precise and knowledgeable about mathematics and geography. It took him all over the surrounding countryside, where he met even more people and learned about their concerns. These different jobs were like stepping stones on his path. They were not just ways to earn a living, they were also a form of education. As a shopkeeper, he learned about commerce and economics. As a postmaster, he learned about communication and community. As a surveyor, he learned about the land and the law. Most importantly, through all these roles, he was developing his skills in dealing with people. He was listening to their stories, understanding their problems, and earning their respect. He was unknowingly preparing himself for a future in public service, building a reputation for honesty and diligence that would serve him well in politics. While working his various jobs in New Salem, Abraham Lincoln's interest in politics began to grow. He saw how laws and government decisions affected the lives of his neighbors and friends. He believed he could make a positive difference. So, in 1832, at the young age of 23, he decided to run for the Illinois state legislature. He did not have any political experience or powerful connections. He simply traveled around the district, giving speeches and talking to voters. He spoke about improving transportation, like building better roads and canals, which were important issues for the people of his region. He was a natural storyteller, and people enjoyed listening to him. Although he was popular in his own village of New Salem, he lost that first election. He did not have enough name recognition across the entire district. However, he was not discouraged by this defeat. Instead, he saw it as a learning experience. He realized he needed to become more well-known and that he needed to study more. He decided to pursue a career in law. He began to study law books on his own, just as he had studied everything else. He would read late into the night, teaching himself the complex principles of the legal system. He knew that being a lawyer would not only provide a stable career but also give him the skills needed for politics. 2 years later, in 1834, Lincoln ran for the state legislature again. This time, he was better prepared. He had studied hard, worked as a postmaster, and become a respected member of the community. He traveled more widely, met more people, and honed his speaking skills. His persistence paid off. He won the election and began his political career as a representative in the Illinois General Assembly. He served 4 terms there, gaining valuable experience in how government worked. He learned about debating, writing laws, and forming alliances with other politicians to get things done. He was known for his logical arguments and his ability to find common ground. During his time as a state legislator, Lincoln also completed his legal studies. He was officially admitted to the bar in 1836, becoming a lawyer. He moved to Springfield, the new state capital, to practice law and continue his political career. As a lawyer, he traveled from town to town, arguing cases in court. This work further sharpened his mind and his ability to persuade others. He handled all sorts of cases, from simple disputes between neighbors to complex corporate lawsuits. His journey into politics was not a quick or easy one. It was a slow and steady climb, built on hard work, self-improvement, and a genuine desire to serve the public. Abraham Lincoln's life was filled with, many challenges and failures, long before he became president. These setbacks could have easily made him give up, but they only strengthened his resolve. After his first business failed and left him in debt, he faced another personal loss. He fell in love with a young woman named Anne Rutledge, but she tragically died from a fever. This loss plunged him into a deep depression. It was a period of immense sadness for him, and his friends worried about his well-being. Yet, he slowly found the strength to carry on, channeling his energy into his studies and his budding political career. His political journey was also far from smooth. After serving in the Illinois state legislature, he was elected to the United States House of Representatives in 1846 for a single term. During his time in Washington, D.C., he spoke out against the Mexican-American War. This was an unpopular position, and it cost him political support back home. He did not run for re-election and returned to Springfield to focus on his law practice. For a while, it seemed as though his national political career was over. He was a one-term congressman who had faded from the national scene, a footnote in the larger story of American politics. Years later, his passion for politics was reignited by the issue of slavery. In 1854, a new law called the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed, which allowed for the potential expansion of slavery into new territories. Lincoln was deeply opposed to this. He decided to re-enter politics to fight against the spread of slavery. In 1855, he ran for the United States Senate, but had to withdraw from the race at the last minute to ensure another anti-slavery candidate would win. In 1858, he ran for the Senate again, this time against the famous politician Stephen A. Douglas. Their series of debates across Illinois became legendary, but in the end, Lincoln lost the election. This defeat in the 1858 Senate race was another major disappointment. He had poured all his effort into the campaign and had gained national attention for his powerful arguments against slavery. To lose after coming so close was a heavy blow. Lesser men might have abandoned their political ambitions for good. But Lincoln did not see these events as final defeats. He saw them as part of a longer struggle. Each failure taught him something new. It made him more determined and more focused. His persistence in the face of so many personal and professional setbacks is, honestly, one of the most inspiring parts of his story. He simply refused to quit. Despite his loss in the 1858 Senate race, I had become a prominent national figure. My debates with Stephen A. Douglas had been widely reported in newspapers across the country. Folks were impressed by my clear, logical arguments and my strong moral stance against the expansion of slavery. I had emerged as a leading voice in the new Republican Party, which was formed to oppose slavery. My famous House Divided speech, where I declared that a house divided against itself cannot stand, really resonated with many who feared the country was being torn apart over the issue. I was seen as a thoughtful and principled leader. As the 1860 presidential election approached, the Republican Party needed a candidate who could win. Several other prominent Republicans were considered, but they also had many political enemies. I, on the other hand, was seen as a more moderate choice. My life story was also very appealing. I was the rail splitter, the self-made man from a log cabin who represented the American dream. My supporters promoted this image, highlighting my honesty and my connection to the common person. They presented me as a man of the people who could unite the party and the nation. At the Republican National Convention in Chicago, my supporters worked tirelessly behind the scenes. They made deals and persuaded delegates to back their candidate. On the third ballot, I secured the nomination for president. The news was a surprise to many, including myself. The election that followed was one of the most divided in American history. The Democratic Party was split into two factions, and a fourth candidate also ran. This division among my opponents was a key factor in my victory. I won the presidency with a majority of the electoral votes, but did not win a single southern state. My election was a turning point for the United States. Many people in the South saw me and the Republican Party as a grave threat to their way of life, which was built on the institution of slavery. Even before I was officially inaugurated as president in March 1861, the crisis began. Southern states started to secede, or leave the Union. They did not want to be part of a country led by a president who was opposed to slavery. The man who had worked his way up from a log cabin was now facing the greatest challenge any American president had ever faced: the complete collapse of the nation itself. When I took the oath of office as the 16th President of the United States, the country was already falling apart. 7 southern states had already seceded and formed their own government, the Confederate States of America. My primary goal was to preserve the Union. In my first inaugural address, I appealed to the southern states to reconsider their decision. I assured them that I had no intention of interfering with slavery where it already existed. I spoke of the mystic cords of memory that connected all Americans and pleaded for peace. I wanted to avoid war at all costs, but I also made it clear that I would not allow the Union to be destroyed. My pleas for peace were not heard. In April 1861, just a month after I became president, Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter, a United States federal fort in Charleston, South Carolina. This act of aggression marked the beginning of the Civil War. The conflict that I had hoped to avoid was now a reality. 4 more southern states seceded, and the nation was plunged into a brutal and bloody war. I had to become a wartime president, a role for which I had no prior experience. I had to raise an army, find capable generals, and manage the enormous task of leading the country through its darkest hour. The early years of the war were very difficult for the Union. The Confederate Army was well led and won many of the initial battles. I struggled to find a general who could effectively lead the Union Army to victory. I went through a series of commanders, each one failing to deliver the decisive results I needed. I spent countless hours in the War Department, reading telegraphs from the front lines and trying to understand military strategy. I faced immense pressure and criticism from all sides. Some people thought I was not doing enough to win the war, while others thought the war was a terrible mistake. Throughout these difficult times, my leadership was tested every day. I had to manage not only the war effort but also the political divisions within the North. I dealt with politicians who wanted to end the war, with newspaper editors who criticized my every move, and with the immense grief of a nation that was losing its sons on the battlefield. I visited soldiers in hospitals, wrote countless letters to grieving families, and carried the weight of the war on my shoulders. My steady hand and unwavering determination were crucial in holding the Union together during this period of extreme crisis. I never lost faith that the nation could be saved. As the Civil War continued, my thinking about the purpose of the war began to evolve. Initially, my main goal was simply to preserve the Union. However, I came to believe that the war could not be won, and the Union could not be truly saved, without addressing the root cause of the conflict: slavery. I understood that slavery was a moral evil that contradicted the nation's founding principles of liberty and equality. I began to see the war as an opportunity, not just to reunite the country, but to give it a new birth of freedom. This was a monumental shift in the objectives of the war. In the summer of 1862, after a crucial Union victory at the Battle of Antietam, I felt the time was right to act. I issued a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. This document declared that on January 1st, 1863, all enslaved people in the states that were still in rebellion against the Union shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free. This was a bold and revolutionary step. It transformed the Civil War from a fight to save the Union into a fight for human freedom. It also had a practical effect, as it encouraged enslaved people in the South to escape to Union lines, weakening the Confederate war effort. On January 1, 1863, I signed the final Emancipation Proclamation. While it did not immediately free all enslaved people in the entire country, it did not apply to the border states that had remained in the Union. It was a powerful moral and symbolic statement. For the first time, the United States government had officially taken a stand against slavery. The proclamation also allowed for the recruitment of African American soldiers into the Union Army. Nearly 200,000 black soldiers and sailors would go on to fight for the Union, playing a vital role in securing its ultimate victory. Their bravery and service helped to turn the tide of the war. My commitment to ending slavery did not stop with the proclamation. I knew that a presidential order could be reversed by a future president or court. To make emancipation permanent and to abolish slavery throughout the entire country, I worked tirelessly to pass the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. This was a difficult political battle, but I used all of my skill and influence to persuade members of Congress to support it. The amendment was finally passed in January 1865. This act was the final nail in the coffin of slavery in the United States, and it stands as one of my greatest and most enduring achievements. In April 1865, the Civil War finally came to an end. The Union was preserved. My joy, however, was short-lived. Just days after the Confederate surrender, I was assassinated while attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. The nation, just beginning to celebrate the end of a long and terrible war, was plunged into mourning. The leader who had guided them through their darkest hour was gone. My sudden and tragic death cemented my place as a martyr for the cause of unity and freedom. People across the country and around the world grieved the loss of the man who had saved the American Republic. My legacy is immense and continues to shape the United States today. I am remembered first and foremost as the savior of the Union. Through my steadfast leadership and unwavering determination, I prevented the country from splitting into two separate nations. I believed that the American experiment in democracy was a beacon of hope for the entire world, and I fought to ensure that a government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. My words, especially in the Gettysburg Address, continue to define the nation's highest ideals and aspirations. I am also celebrated as the great emancipator. While the struggle for racial equality would continue for generations, my actions set the nation on a new path. By issuing the Emancipation Proclamation and pushing for the 13th Amendment, I destroyed the institution of slavery that had plagued the country since its founding. I expanded the meaning of freedom in America, beginning the long and difficult process of extending the nation's promise of liberty to all its citizens. My moral courage in confronting the issue of slavery changed the course of American history forever. Today, I am revered as one of the greatest presidents in American history. My life story serves as a powerful inspiration. It is a story of how a poor boy born in a log cabin, with little formal education, could rise to the highest office in the land through hard work, honesty, and a profound love of learning. My journey reminds us of the power of perseverance in the face of failure. My leadership during the Civil War reminds us of the importance of unity, compassion, and moral conviction. My legacy is not just in the monuments built in my honor, but in the very fabric of the nation I fought so hard to preserve and perfect.